Hi, everybody. This is the walkthrough that we should have done yesterday in class, but instead the Zoom decided to just quit on us. So first thing I wanted to do was talk about some of the basic things like sorting, filtering, and deleting. Um, Up here, so let's start by saying we've got three variables, right? We've got the institution identifier, a student ID, which is fake, and then the high school GPA for each of the students. Those three variables are the ones that we're going to work with. And right up here in the very top right is the sort and filter selection. So what I want us to do is first turn on the filter by just clicking filter. And now you'll be able to see we can actually filter by institutions. So if we only wanted institution 2 to show up, institution 2 now shows up by us clicking it and hitting OK. To select all, we just hit select all and hit OK, or clear filter, either one works. And now we've got all of our data back on the screen. If we want to make, let's just say we want to delete all of the values for institution 2, what I would recommend you do is maintain your original worksheet in case you need to come back to it, but just click anywhere on the numbers or the fields and hit Control A, and you'll notice how it selects everything. And then Control C or right click and copy, and then create a new tab down here at the bottom, right beside the demo, and it'll create a new sheet. And now at the very top, just make sure you're selecting cell A1 and hit Control V or paste. Paste values, paste the very first paste or paste values is fine. And now we've got those. And so we can turn on the filter here and filter for institution 2. And now if I wanted to delete all the values for institution 2, bring my mouse over here where it's hovering over the road number, select it and drag down to select all of them. And then right click and hit delete row. And now when we unfilter, we'll find that we only have institution 1 data values. All of the institution 2 data values are gone. So that's sorting, filtering, and deleting, at least just a quick little intro there. We can also custom sort on our sheet to sort by ID number or GPA, and then by institution, etc. You can have multiple levels of sorting, but you should know that if we sort by institution and then by GPA, it's going to put all institution 1 fields first and then sort those values by GPA, and then all institution 2 sorted by high school GPA. So smallest to largest, A to Z. Excel knows what kind of data you have in your spreadsheet. By looking up here, you can see what's a text or what's a number. So it knows that high school GPA is a number, so it's giving you the options of smallest to largest, etc. When you hit OK, now we've got institution 1, high school GPA, very low 1.37, should go all the way up to 4.0. And then institution 2 should begin. Okay. So let's find institution 2 just to make sure it is right there. Yep. So institution 2, the lowest GPA is 1.77. But you see how we've sorted those. Great. So now that we have that, I want us to work on determining what our confidence intervals are. But first, we have to find a couple of key items like the mean, the standard deviation, and the number of records. The confidence level that we want to use here is 1.96 for that Z-score of 95%, because we're doing 95% confidence intervals. The Z-score of 1.96 is the one that we'll use. So 1.96 under both institution 1 and institution 2. And then now we have to find the average high school GPA. So you can do this 2 ways. I'm going to show you both. The first one is just equal average. Double click it, and you can click on institution 1, first GPA, and scroll all the way down for about 1,000 or so records. And it may take you a minute to find the end, but once you find the end, there it is. Boom, done. 1,058 is the row I want to use. So there's that. I'll hit OK. The average GPA for institution 1 for high school, or for brand new, these, by the way, these are first time in college students, straight out of high school. So this entering class, the average GPA is 2.61. Now I want to find the average for institution 2. So we do the same thing, right? Except we start with where 1058, row 1058 is, and take it on down from there. Because remember, we sorted it. So we know there's no institution 1 values once we get to institution 2. We click and select and cover everything, and there we go. So they're entering high school GPA is 3.42. Wow, that looks different, right? So from a statistical standpoint, we already see that at least numerically it's different, but the confidence intervals are going to help us figure out if statistically it is different. Now what we need to do is find the standard deviation for each of these groups. And the formula for this is STD-EVA. And the reason we use A is because it's based on a sample. So STD-EVA. And we do the same thing. Click and highlight institution 1 all the way down to 1058 to get the standard deviation for this sample. And then, again, standard deviation for institution 2. What I'm going to show you here is, watch this. If you just, because the same rows are relevant for standard deviation as they are for average, all you have to do is click in the little formula bar right up here. It's called the formula bar. Click and select the formula, hit copy or Control C, and come down, hit escape, and then come down and hit Control V or paste. Either one. Control V does the same thing. But now all you have to do is double click it and type STD-EVA. And it's one way to save some time. That way you don't have to go back and highlight all the standard deviations. So we know the standard deviation is 0.41 for institution 1. Let's do the same thing here. Just copy the average formula, paste it, but change it to STD-EVA just to make sure we're good to go there. And boom, 0.41, very simple. Okay, now the end, the count of values. What we can do here is, again, do an Excel function for count, and it's very nice. It's just count and go through everything. But I think we learned a lesson on this most recent one. And instead, now that we know the range of our values, we can just simply copy a formula, paste that formula, and change average to count. And the same thing here, we can do it with standard deviation even, just copy the formula, paste the formula, and change it to count. So there we go, 1,057 cases, 469 cases respectively. Okay, now this is the part where we are going to determine what the confidence interval is. And so now what we have to do is a little bit more complex formula. It is the z-score, 1.96, multiplied by the standard deviation, and that's divided by the square root of the number of cases in the sample. So the way we write that out is equal sign, open parentheses, z-score times the standard deviation, close parentheses, divisor, so the little dividing line, and then we actually have to input another function here for square root because we want to take the square root of n. So start typing SQRT, right? And then open another parentheses and select n, close the parentheses, And I'm actually going to couch square root function in parentheses also, just to make sure Excel knows that that's separate from the top of the dividing equation. So here we go. We've got the level of confidence, 1.96, z-score, right, multiplied by the standard deviation, divided by the square root of 1057, which is the number of cases. And then we hit enter. And you see our margin of error is 0.02. You can come up to the numbers section on the home tab and expand the decimal a little bit if you want to see how, exactly what it may be. But the margin of error is 0.0249. Now let's calculate it for institution 2 to see what the margin of error is. And we can do this the same way we did before by typing out the equation. Or if you notice, again, the crosshair down here at the bottom, on the bottom right, you can drag that bar over. And what it does is, because we don't have anything saying maintain just the cell number or just the column label of F, when we do this, it's going to change all the F's to G's because we're telling the formula to move. So let's see what happens here. We've got our square root. Oh, not sure. Okay, you know what? We're going to do it the old-fashioned way just to make sure. Sorry about that, y'all. Oh, I see what happened. Sorry about that. If you notice, I typed 1,96 instead of 1.96. I haven't had enough coffee yet. So now what we'll do is drag that formula over and boom, voila. So what do we notice immediately here? The margin of error for institution 1 is pretty small, 0.0249, so 0.025 GPA points, right? Whereas institution 2 has a little bit greater margin of error of 0.0437. So now what we have to do is calculate our upper and lower bounds of the confidence interval. Because remember, confidence intervals are whatever the average score is, plus minus, something, right? And so for the institution 1, it would be 0.0249 or 5, right? And the way we would also write that is 3.61, and then in brackets, plus or whatever that plus minus is, we would actually calculate it for 3.61. So we'll get to that part in just a second. So we know our mean is 361, so we do it equals for bring in the mean, and then we add it to the margin of error. So on the upper end, our GPA is 3.64. And on the lower end, we subtract it. So we take the mean and subtract it by the margin of error. And so now our confidence interval is 3.64 to 3.59 for 95%. Or you can write it 3.61 plus minus 0.025. So hope that helps. Hope that makes sense. And now again, we can take both of those, select both of them at the same time, drag them over, and it automatically calculates the upper and lower bounds for institution 2. Well, that's wonderful. Now we've got the numbers we need. What I want you to do next is to create a chart out of this. And so what I would like for you to do is start by selecting institution 1 and institution 2 and the mean value only, and go to insert, and under bar charts or column charts, take a 2D clustered column chart. You can go ahead and delete the title and move it on over a little bit. For the sake of just knowing what we're looking at, let's change institution 1 to a different color. So you'll notice I click on it and both bars are selected, and I click on it again and only one bar is selected. And under format, I'll change that shape fill to a gray, just so I know I'm looking at institution 1, institution 2. Now with the chart selected, Under Design, go to Add Chart Elements. And here, there's an option for error bars. And under More Error Bar options, you can do a custom error bar. And that custom error bar allows us to specify exactly the value we want. So it's going to ask for positive and negative error. Well, that's basically the margin of error that we've already determined. So if our positive error is plus 0.0249 and our negative error is minus 0.0249, then we're actually going to select 0.0249 for both. But because we have two institutions, we have to come in here and select both at the same time. And Excel will apply those error calculations to each one individually. So we've done it for the positive error. Now we have to do it for the negative error. So just put your cursor in there or minimize it by clicking that little button and do it again for margin of error. And now watch, those error bars are going to shrink way down. And this is one of my favorite things that I didn't know for a long time that you can do, but that is essentially our 95% confidence interval for both of these institutions. And it should be noted that they don't overlap, right? So to the question of you understanding, that 95% confidence intervals say that our average score for the high school GPA falls within this range for this sample, and we can extrapolate to the population with an understanding of 95%, confidence. We can honestly say that the high school GPA calculations for students that go to Institution 1 versus Institution 2 are different as a whole. So those two institutions have students with different high school GPAs. There's not as much overlap as you might think are common with high school GPA. So that is essentially it. You can, of course, if you want to come in here and do a little bit more formatting, you can right-click on the error bars and format them and make them, click on the paint can. You can make them a little bit wider so they're easier to see. You can also change colors. You can do it whatever you want. But this is how you both calculate confidence intervals as well as chart them out and be able to see a difference. And I don't know, if you look at my notes in the PowerPoint, you'll notice that I put a extra line here just to point out kind of where that end is if you're ever really, really close. That's one way to do it. Just make sure you change the height of your line to 0 so it's flat and bring it down to the very bottom. So you can definitely see there's a gap here. Okay. Well, that's it. I appreciate y'all walking through it with me. But if you decide to keep watching, I'm going to show you a little bit of a bonus here. I'm going to show you how to use the if command as well. So I showed you how to do the mean or the average, and that is the most straightforward way. But what if I didn't want to scroll all the way through these fields to find where Institution 1 ended? I could do an, let's just say it, average if, there it is, average if. And basically what that tells me, it's a two-step, kind of three-step process. First, I select column C. I'm sorry, I select column A, my bad. I select column A because that's the range of the values I'm trying to find a criteria for. I hit comma, and I tell it I want to find Institution 1. And I believe I need to put quotes around it just to make sure Excel knows that I'm talking about text. It could just be a single quote. We'll find out here in a second. And then I select column C because that's what I want to calculate average for. So what this formula is doing is it's looking in column A for any field that has Institution 1. And wherever it finds it, that's when it's going to calculate the average for column C. only for those values that institution 1 has. Look at there. Isn't that nice? So instead of having to go through and scroll, the average if function did exactly what we wanted. Now, if we want to move it over to institution 2, we copy the formula, paste it, but then just change institution 1 to institution 2. Diff, right? It does the same thing in a lot quicker way. I don't believe there is a standard deviation if function, so no, there's not. Standard deviation is still the same way, but we can also do a count if. And count if allows us to do the exact same thing that we talked about. So essentially, count institution 1, we'll select column A again because that's the criteria that we're looking for, and we'll set the criteria as institution 1 and hit OK. And it counts the number of rows that have institution 1 as 57, and then again for institution 2, 469. There we go. So hopefully that may save you a little bit of time, but I wanted you to know both the regular formulas as well as the, because you have to do the standard deviation in that same way. So it's really helpful to kind of know more than one way to do things. But I hope this has been helpful, and please let me know if you have any questions.